Imagine, it's 1989. You're standing in the middle of the Ginza district in Tokyo. The land underneath your feet, just the dirt under the Imperial Palace in the center of Tokyo, is technically worth more than all the real estate in the entire state of California combined. The world isn't just watching you, the world is terrified of you. But here's the thing. While the rest of the world is currently panicking about a sudden market crash in 2026, Japan has been living inside a crash for 30 years. The data confirms a terrifying reality. Japan has discovered the ultimate economic cheat code. They've realized that you don't actually need growth to survive. You just need to learn how to print your own oxygen. Meet Sato. In 1989, Sato was the undisputed king of the world. He was a young salaryman. He worked 15 hours a day. He saved every yen he could. And eventually, he did what everyone told him was the smart move. He bought a tiny one-bedroom apartment for the equivalent of $1 million. He didn't care about the price. Why would he? In 1989, Japanese property only went up. It was a law of physics. Fast forward to today. Sato is 65 years old and nearing retirement. That same apartment, the one he spent his entire life paying for, it's worth about $200,000 today. He lost 80% of his net worth by doing everything right. Actually, it's worse than that. Sato hasn't had a real raise in 30 years. The price of his favorite beef bowl, the price of his subway fare, it's all frozen in time. Everything stopped. And yet, if you walk through Tokyo today, you won't see a wasteland. You'll see clean streets, the most efficient trains on Earth, and a society that seems perfectly fine. Observe the contradiction. Japan has the highest debt-to-GDP ratio in the developed world. Their population is shrinking by nearly 1 million people every year. By every law of economics taught in every university, Japan should have collapsed into a heap of rubble decades ago. But it hasn't. If you ignore what is happening in Japan, you are ignoring your own future. Because Japan isn't an outlier. Japan is a laboratory for the rest of us. Over the next 23 minutes, we are going to map out the ghost economy. We are going to look at the zombie companies roaming the streets of Osaka, the secret life support system keeping the yen alive, and finally, the checkmate question that will determine if your own country is already on the same path. History proves that what starts in Tokyo eventually ends up on Wall Street. In the 1980s, the world was absolutely convinced that Japan was going to buy the entire planet. They owned the Rockefeller Center in New York. They owned the most prestigious golf courses in America. Sony was the Apple of its day. If you didn't have a Walkman, you weren't relevant. Common sense told everyone that Japan's rise was permanent. But that common sense was a liability. Here's the reality of how old world economics worked. You borrow money, you build a factory, you sell products, you pay back the loan with interest, and you keep the profit. Growth was the fuel. Growth was the air. But in 1990, the fuel ran out. The Japanese bubble didn't just pop, it evaporated. Now realize this. Most countries, when faced with a massive crash, take the pain. It's like a forest fire. It's terrifying, but it clears out the dead wood so that new trees can grow. You let the bad banks fail. You let the weak companies go bankrupt. Japan refused to do that. They looked at the forest fire and decided they would rather live in a forest of dead, standing trees than deal with the smoke. They decided that the pain of a market crash was too much to bear. So they started a 30-year experiment in economic stagnation. Think about your own life for a second. Imagine if you bought a car for $50,000 today. You're proud of it. But the next morning, the market has changed. Now, that car is only worth $5,000. But here's the kicker. Your loan is still for $50,000. You can't sell the car because you'd still owe the bank $45,000 you don't have. You can't afford to buy a new, better car. You are stuck. You are driving a car that is worth nothing, paying a debt that is worth everything. That is what happened to an entire nation. The Bank of Japan, the BOJ, stepped in and did something that was at the time considered an act of economic heresy. They lowered interest rates to 0. They thought this would jumpstart the heart. They thought if money was free, people would borrow and spend. But they forgot the most important element in any economy: psychology. When you've seen your life savings and your home value vanish in a single year, you don't want to borrow more money, even if the interest rate is 0. You want to pay back what you already owe so you can sleep at night. This is what economists call a balance sheet recession. While the rest of the world was looking at Japan and saying, "Why aren't they growing?" the Japanese people were saying, "We just want to get back to 0." The data confirms that for 30 years, the Japanese consumer has been in a defensive crouch, and when the consumer stops moving, the economy becomes a ghost. Think about it. If you save every penny because you're afraid of the future, the shopkeeper sells nothing. The shopkeeper then fires his staff. The staff then has no money to spend. It's a circle, but instead of a circle of life, it's a circle of silence. This brings us to the most dangerous resident of the ghost economy: the zombie company. In a healthy, functioning economy, companies that don't make money die. It sounds brutal, I know, but it's necessary. It's called creative destruction. If a company makes a flip phone in an era of smartphones, it should go out of business. Why? So that the workers and the money can move to the smartphone company. But in Japan, the government made a choice. They couldn't let the flip phone companies die. If they died, millions of people would lose their jobs at once. The social fabric of the country, which prizes stability above all else, would tear. So, they created a system of emergency loans. These companies aren't profitable. They haven't had a new idea since 1995. They aren't building the next iPhone or the next Tesla. They are just walking. They earn just enough money to pay the interest on their loans, but they will never, ever be able to pay off the actual debt. Now, imagine you are a young, brilliant entrepreneur in Tokyo today. You have a great idea for a new AI startup. You need talented workers, but all the workers are stuck at the zombie companies because they have job security. You need office space, but the zombies are occupying the offices, paying subsidized rent. You need bank loans, but the banks are busy keeping the zombies on life support so they don't have to admit the loans are bad. This is the systemic trap. The specific enemy here isn't just a bad business. The enemy is the status quo. The Japanese government became so terrified of a market crash that they accidentally banned market success. Imagine you are Sato's son. You work at one of these companies. You know the company has no future. You know your salary will be the exact same in 10 years as it is today. But the culture is rigid. You still have to show up at 8 a.m. You still have to stay until your boss leaves at 9 p.m. to show loyalty to a dead company. You are a ghost working for a ghost. And the worst part? You're being told that this is stability. But stability without growth is just a slow-motion collapse. It's a comfortable prison. The data proves that these zombie companies now make up nearly 15% of the entire corporate landscape in Japan. They are the financial termites. They are eating the house from the inside out, while the owners, the government, pretend the wood is still solid by painting over the holes. To truly understand why Japan hasn't collapsed yet, you have to look at the economic life support. Most people think of an economy like an engine. You put in fuel, which is spending and investment, and you get movement, which we call GDP. But Japan isn't an engine anymore. It's a patient in an ICU. The Bank of Japan is the nurse, and they are holding a giant IV bag labeled unlimited debt. Here's the financial physics of the situation. Normally, if a country has massive debt and zero growth, investors get scared. They think, this country can't pay me back, so they sell the currency. Interest rates spike because the country has to bribe people to lend them money. The country goes broke. That is gravity. That is how the world works for everyone else. But Japan has found a way to turn off gravity. The Bank of Japan decided that if nobody else in the world wanted to buy their government's debt, they would just buy it themselves. They aren't just the nurse, they are also the pharmacy and the blood donor. They print money out of thin air to buy their own government's bonds. This keeps interest rates at zero. They call this yield curve control, but I call it printing your own oxygen. As long as the nurse keeps swapping the bags, the patient stays alive. But observe the side effects of living on pure, printed oxygen. When you print oxygen, the oxygen becomes less valuable. This is why the yen has been on a terrifying roller coaster of devaluations. It's why a trip to Tokyo is so cheap for you, but a trip to America is impossibly expensive for Sato. But more importantly, when the government owns half of the entire stock market, which the Bank of Japan actually does, the market no longer exists. Price discovery is dead. In a normal world, the price of a stock tells you if a company is doing well. In Japan, the price of a stock just tells you how much the government decided to buy that day. Think about the friction this creates for a normal person. In a normal world, if you save money, you earn interest. Your money grows while you sleep. That's the reward for not spending. In the ghost economy, your savings are a melting ice cube. Because interest rates are zero and sometimes negative, your money stays exactly the same size. But meanwhile, the cost of imported things, like the gas for Sato's car or the wheat for his bread, slowly creeps up because the yen is getting weaker. Here is the aha moment. Japan isn't trying to win anymore. They have given up on the idea of a boom. They're just trying not to lose today. They have traded the future for the present. They're keeping the heart beating even though the body refuses to wake up. And the longer they stay on this life support, the harder it is to ever leave the hospital. Because the moment you turn off the machines, the moment you let interest rates rise to normal levels, the zombie companies die. The government's debt becomes unpayable. The stability vanishes. The nurse is trapped in the room with the patient. The rest of the world looks at this and thinks, that's a Japan problem. They're just weird. But look at the debt levels in Washington. Look at the balance sheets in Brussels. The nurses are already starting to prepare the IV bags. They're just waiting for the patient to stop breathing. Let's reset, because there is one thing that is even scarier than the zombie companies or the ICU. It's something you can't fix with a printing press. The empty chair. Economics is not about charts or yield curves. Economics is, at its core, a game of people. You need young people to work. You need them to invent new things. And, most importantly, you need them to buy things they don't need. In the 1950s and 60s, Japan was a demographic explosion. There were kids everywhere. The future was bright. But today, Japan is the oldest society on the face of the earth. Let's look at the story of a place called Nagoro. It's a small, beautiful village in the mountains of Japan. Once, it was a bustling town with a school, shops, and hundreds of families. Today, there are only about 27 residents left. Most of them are over the age of 70. But if you walk through Nagoro, you will see hundreds of people. Except they aren't people. They are life-sized straw dolls. An artist in the village makes a doll every time someone dies or moves away. She puts them in the old school. She puts them at the bus stop, waiting for a bus that rarely comes. This isn't a scene from a horror movie. This is the ultimate reality of the ghost economy. When your population shrinks, your economy naturally shrinks with it. It's simple math. Think about it like this. If there were 100 people buying bread from the local baker yesterday and only 90 people today, the bakery sells less bread. The baker can't afford to hire a helper anymore. The helper, who is young, moves to the big city to find work. Now, the village has one less young person, which means one less wedding, which means 0 new babies. Eventually, the bakery closes. Now multiply that one bakery by an entire nation. Japan is losing about 800,000 people every single year. That's like losing a city the size of Seattle every 12 months. This creates what economists call a deflationary spiral. Why would Sato buy a house today if he knows there will be 10,000 more empty houses next year? If there are fewer buyers, the price must go down. So he waits. And if everyone waits, nobody buys. And if nobody buys, the companies make no money. And if the companies make no money, they become zombies. The government tries to fix this by printing more money. They try to tape the cracks in the economy. But here's the hard truth. You can't print people. You can print all the yen in the world. You can give it away for free. But if there isn't a 25-year-old who wants to get married, buy a car, and start a life, that money just sits in a bank vault doing absolutely nothing. The zombie walk continues. The old people in Japan hold almost all of the country's wealth, but they don't spend it because they are afraid they will outlive their savings. The young people have no wealth, so they can't afford to have children. The result is a country that is slowly, politely, and very quietly fading away. Now, here is the truth bomb that makes most people very uncomfortable. You might be sitting there in the US or the UK or Australia thinking, well, Japan is unique. They have a different culture. They're isolated. They don't like immigration. They are just different. Admit it, that's what you're thinking. But history proves that Japan isn't an anomaly. Japan is a forward indicator. Every developed nation on this planet is currently following the Japanese blueprint, whether they want to or not. Look at the US national debt. It's now over $34 trillion. Look at the declining birth rates in almost every Western country. Look at the zero interest rate policy that the Federal Reserve used for over a decade. We are all becoming Japan. The only difference is that Japan got to the destination first. And here is the ugly side of the solution. 99% of people who watch this video will still fail to prepare for it. Why? Because the ghost economy is surprisingly comfortable. In Japan, there is almost no crime. The streets are spotless. The trains are never a second late. The food is world class. It feels like a paradise, but it's a paradise built on a foundation of stolen time. By keeping interest rates at zero to support zombie companies, the government is effectively stealing the future wealth of the next generation to pay for the comfort of the current one. If you are a millennial or Gen Z, you have to realize that the American dream, the idea of 8% annual stock market growth and a booming retirement fund, is not a law of nature. It was a byproduct of a specific time in history, a time with a massive population boom and a planet with endless new resources. That time is over. Cognitive dissonance is a powerful thing. You want to believe that the market always goes up in the long run. But for 30 years in Japan, the market went sideways or down. If your entire retirement plan is based on the assumption that your country won't Japanitify, you are gambling with your life. The system is no longer designed to make you rich. It is designed to keep the patient on life support so the nurse doesn't lose her job. Now that you see the system, it can no longer control you. It's easy to feel a sense of existential dread after hearing all this. It's easy to get angry at the zombies or the central bankers who are printing the oxygen. But anger is not a strategy. Actually, there is a strange, hidden kind of freedom in the ghost economy. When the rat race stops working, when you finally realize that working 80 hours a week for a company that is technically dead won't actually make you a millionaire, you are forced to change your definition of success. De-shame yourself for a moment. If you feel like you are working harder than your parents did, but you're getting less, it's not because you are lazy or bad with money. It's because the economic gravity of the entire world has changed. In a world of zero growth, you cannot rely on the tide to lift all boats, because the tide is no longer coming in. You have to build your own motor. Now that the curtain is pulled back, you can stop playing the old game. You can stop following the advice of people who grew up in the 1970s and 80s, because their world does not exist anymore. You are living in the laboratory, and in a laboratory, the only way to survive is to be the scientist, not the test subject. So, how do you actually win in a ghost economy? You can't change the Bank of Japan, and you can't make people have more babies, but you can protect yourself. You need 3 weapons. Weapon 1, the mental shift. Stop measuring your wealth in nominal dollars. That's just a number on a screen. Start measuring it in purchasing power. In Japan, the price of things didn't go up for 30 years, but the quality of life stayed high. In the West, we are seeing the opposite. The numbers in our bank accounts are going up because of inflation, but our quality of life is dropping. Realize that the system wants you to keep chasing the numbers. Don't fall for it. Focus on assets that provide real-world utility, things that people will always need, regardless of what the central bank is doing. Weapon 2, the immediate action. Diversify out of the ICU. If your country is following the Japan blueprint, and almost all of them are, do not keep 100% of your life tied to that one country. Look for markets and assets that still have the fuel of growth. Look for places with young populations, cultures that prize innovation over stability, and most importantly, places that still have market discipline. Do not let your life savings become a melting ice cube in a zero-interest bank account while the currency devalues. Weapon 3, the systemic shield. Avoid zombie employment at all costs. Do not tie your fate to a company that only exists because of cheap debt or government subsidies. If your company hasn't launched a successful new product in a decade, it is a zombie. The first people to be sacrificed when the life support eventually fails, and it always fails eventually, are the ones on the treadmill. Be the person who provides a service or a skill that people need and are willing to pay for in any economy. Now, here is the checkmate question. If Japan is the future of every developed nation, are you prepared to live in a world where your hard work no longer makes you richer, but simply keeps you from falling behind? Think about your answer, because the choice isn't whether or not the ghost economy is coming. The choice is whether you are going to be a resident or a ghost. Here is the ultimate truth. Japan is not a failure. In many ways, it is a miracle of social engineering. They have managed to maintain a high-functioning, peaceful, and beautiful society, while the very math of their economy collapsed underneath them. But that miracle has a price, and that price is the future. The single most powerful sentence you need to remember from this entire journey is this: stability is not the same thing as health. Sometimes the most stable thing in the world is a grave. Your legacy shouldn't be defined by how well you played a rigged game. It should be defined by how well you protected your family and your future from the inevitable fallout of that game. This matters because the ghost economy is a slow-motion thief. It doesn't rob you overnight with a mask and a gun. It robs you 1 year of stagnation at a time. It robs you by making you work for free money that buys less every single year. But even as you mastered this level, even as you learned to navigate the ICU of modern economics, a new, more invisible wall is waiting for you in the shadows. Because there is one silent force that destroys even those who follow all the rules. A force that has nothing to do with debt and everything to do with the very air you breathe. Next time we pull back the curtain on that invisible barrier, stay sharp. The ghosts are watching.